Neuroplasticity, How My Post-Stroke Brain Reorganized, Reopened Dormant Circuits, and Recovered Long-Forgotten Learned Knowledge and Song, number 1446, November 24, 2025. Gerald C. EclaireMD Foundation. Category, Stroke and Neuroplasticity. Preface. After my hemorrhagic stroke on June 21, 2025, I expected the usual outcomes that doctors often warn about: cognitive decline, memory loss, slower thinking, and reduced concentration. Instead, something completely opposite occurred. My cognitive performance rose sharply. Knowledge I had not used for from 50 to 60 years returned with unexpected clarity. Academic concepts of T Trinity that I struggled to understand for 8 years suddenly became simple. Childhood memory of a song buried for 7 decades resurfaced vividly. All of these unexpected changes point to one driving force: neuroplasticity. Introduction. Neuroplasticity means the brain can reorganize its circuits, strengthen healthy pathways, reopen dormant networks, and create new connections after injury. While most stroke survivors experience decline in thinking and memory, a very small minority, with high cognitive reserve, experience something rare called paradoxical cognitive enhancement. My post-stroke experience fits this rare pattern exceptionally well. Modern neuroscience confirms that when a focal injury occurs, meaning damage to one small and clearly defined region of the brain, the loss of inhibitory signals can release healthy cortical circuits that were previously suppressed. This can produce improved reasoning, memory access, creativity, or pattern recognition. Around 8 to 12 cases of this phenomenon have been documented globally in medical literature. My case shares many features with these rare reports, but spans more cognitive categories than most. Scientific background of this rare cognitive enhancement. Most stroke patients develop cognitive deficits because damaged circuits cannot recover fully. However, neuroscientists have documented a rare phenomenon called paradoxical functional enhancement. In these cases, after a focal brain injury, inhibitory signals weaken, meaning the brain areas whose job is to slow down, block, or limit certain activities become less active. This reduction in inhibition allows dormant or underused neural pathways to activate and strengthen. Examples in published literature include: 1. A patient who developed musical composition ability after a concussion. 2. A patient who demonstrated enhanced mathematical visualization after a trauma. 3. A patient who began producing artistic drawings after a stroke. 4. A patient who regained a long-forgotten childhood language after a minor brain injury. 5. A patient who recovered vivid childhood memories after a focal hemorrhage. Most of these are documented as single case reports in journals such as Neurology, Cortex, Brain, and Cognition, Neurocase, and the Journal of Clinical Neuroscience. They show that when certain inhibitory circuits are disrupted, the cortex may reorganize in a way that improves specific abilities. My June 2025 pons stroke fits this pattern very well. My hemorrhage was confined to the pons, which controls vital automatic life functions. The higher cognitive centers in my cortex, including the areas responsible for memory and reasoning, were not directly affected. Instead, the injury may have disturbed the brain's lower-level control signals. When these braking signals weaken, some quiet areas in the cortex can wake up again, reorganize, and grow stronger. This kind of change is known as reduced inhibition in the cortex. This mechanism explains why my field of view, reasoning depth, integration skills, ability to learn new concepts, and pattern recognition all improved sharply after my stroke rather than declining. My stroke event and survival. Although my stroke occurred near the pons, one of the most dangerous anatomical locations in the brain, I survived. Pontine hemorrhages carry a mortality rate of at least 50%, and can reach as high as 80%. I was fortunate to escape with only one major impairment: memory loss, most likely worsened by several seizures that occurred 2 days after the stroke. Seizures can temporarily interfere with the hippocampus and memory circuits. My memory impairment lasted about 90 days. During the first 10 days, I estimated my memory loss at roughly 40%. I then designed a simple testing method based on repetitive exercises. By around day 90, my memory loss had decreased to about 2%. As my memory slowly returned, other parts of my cognition began to strengthen dramatically. How dormant knowledge resurfaced after from 50 to 60 years. One of the clearest signs of my post-stroke neuroplasticity was the sudden return of deeply buried academic knowledge that I learned in my youth but never used again. These included mathematical concepts, engineering principles, and analytical tools from my university years in the 1960s and 1970s. 2 specific examples stand out: topology from theoretical mathematics, which I first studied in 1968 during my applied mathematics training in Taiwan. Stochastic safety analysis methods from statistics, which I learned in 1978 while studying soil structure interaction at UC Berkeley. For more than from 47 to 57 years, I never used these 2 subjects professionally. I never even thought about them. They remained completely dormant throughout my entire career in 6 failed entrepreneurial attempts, successful semiconductor IC chip design, public company management, and later medical research, until October 2025. Yet after my stroke, these old pathways suddenly reopened. The knowledge felt fresh, as if I had reviewed it recently. Even more surprisingly, I applied both topology and stochastic reasoning to my VPT, VMT, plus TDA, based medical research work, to produce around 40 new research papers in just 2 months. This phenomenon is consistent with neuroscience. When a focal injury reduces inhibitory signals from deeper brain structures, suppressed memory and analytical circuits in the cortex can reconnect and strengthen. The brain essentially lifts the internal brakes that had silenced these old learned pathways for decades. In my case, these locked away periods ranged from 4 decades to 7 decades. Although this kind of sudden reactivation is extremely rare, it has been documented in the limited scientific literature on post-stroke savant-like memory. A Stanford neuroscience professor has also agreed with the validity of the phenomenon. I observed in myself, understanding Magnuson's T Trinity after 8 years. Another example of cortical reorganization was my sudden understanding the T Trinity system of Professor Magnus S. Magnusson from University of Iceland. We first met in early 2018 at an international conference in New York City, where we both served as keynote speakers. After giving our individual presentations, we spent 7 hours talking over dinner. He explained his T pattern, T string, and T society models to me. For the next 8 years, I still could not fully understand his research models, even though I always had deep respect for his intellectual abilities. The structure felt incomplete in my mind, and I could not form a clear mental picture. Early this week, during a phone conversation with Magnus, the entire T Trinity model suddenly became clear. It felt exactly like the resurfacing of topology, stochastic methods, and the childhood song. Something long heard but never comprehended suddenly became simple and logically integrated. This type of instant clarity fits the known pattern of post-stroke cortical disinhibition. When suppressed reasoning networks reopen, the brain is able to reorganize information at a deeper and more integrated level. Concepts that were once difficult can suddenly become obvious. The sudden return of a childhood song after 70 years. One of the most dramatic demonstrations of my neuroplastic recovery was the unexpected return of a childhood song. I learned at age 8 in my elementary school, but had not heard or sung for 70 years. The song was Dreaming of Home and Mother, composed by John P. Ordway in 1868. Although forgotten by many Americans today, it remained a standard song taught in schools across Asia and UK throughout much of the 20th century, including Taiwan, which is why children of my generation all learned it. Its spontaneous resurfacing in my dream without any external trigger shows that deep sensory and emotional memory circuits were reactivated. This is a classical sign of brain injury-induced savant-like memory, where old content stored in long-term networks becomes accessible after inhibitory pathways are disrupted. Why my cognitive enhancement happened, the biological explanation. My stroke damaged brainstem structures but spared my cortex. The cortex is the outer layer of the brain. It is the part that handles thinking, memory, learning, language, reasoning, attention, and decision-making. It is basically the brain's control center for higher intelligence. When subcortical inhibitory pathways are disrupted, the cortex can enter a temporary hyperplastic state. In such a state, healthy circuits become more active and more easily reorganized. People with strong cognitive reserve, lifelong thinking, habits, and continuous intellectual stimulation are especially likely to benefit from this effect. For more than 60 years, I have studied mathematics, physics, engineering, computer science, artificial intelligence, economics, psychology, and medicine. Over the past 16 years, I have analyzed 4 million of data points using my VPT, VMT plus TDA, research method. This lifelong intellectual structure created the foundation for my unusual form of memory, recovery and cognitive enhancement. When inhibitory signals decreased, the cortex reorganized itself into a more efficient network, allowing me to access old pathways, integrate information faster, and comprehend complex patterns instantly. My case in context, among the rarest from 10 to 12 global examples. Medical literature documents only about 8 to 12 known cases of cognitive enhancement after injury. Each case typically features improvement in only one domain, such as mathematics, art, music, language, or memory. My case is unusual because my enhancements occurred across several domains. At the same time, academic knowledge from 50 to 60 years ago resurfaced. A childhood song from 70 years ago returned. My reasoning, pattern recognition, and conceptual integration on my ongoing medical research work became wider, deeper, and faster. I immediately understood Magnusson's T Trinity after 8 years of confusion. My medical research output quantity increased by at least 50%. Both my MIT mentor, Professor Norman Jones and Stanford neurologists acknowledged that the scale of my improvement was unusual. Because my enhancements extend across multiple cognitive domains, my case may represent one of the most comprehensive examples of post-stroke neuroplastic improvement described in modern neuroscience literature. What this means for my stroke recovery: my cognitive improvement was not an accident. It was the result of a neuroplastic surge created by several factors: a small, localized bleed inside the pons, a part of the brainstem, a temporary weakening of the brain's internal braking signals, allowing certain areas of the cortex to become more active, a strong pre-existing cognitive reserve built over 7 decades of knowledge, skills, and mental ability. This reserve gave my brain extra strength to handle injury and recover better than expected. Lifelong habits of intense thinking and analysis, purpose-driven daily brain exercise, through calculating, writing, and modeling, continuous analysis of 4 million personal health data points over 36 years, 7 decades of reading, studying, and solving complex problems. Most stroke survivors regain only part of what they lost. A very small minority improve beyond their previous baseline. My experience belongs to this highly unusual group. My purpose in sharing this: I do not share these experiences for recognition. I share them to show the surprising power of the human brain, even at age 78, even after a dangerous hemorrhagic stroke in the pons. My experience demonstrates that recovery is possible, improvement is possible, unexpected enhancement is possible. With purpose, discipline, and continuous learning, neuroplasticity can rebuild and even elevate cognitive function. Disclaimer: I write this paper not for fame, but to share what I have learned so others can understand their health, prevent disease, and live longer, healthier lives. This content is provided for educational reference only, and does not constitute medical or financial advice. No doctor-patient or advisor-client relationship is created. You may share this summary freely, but it must not be lip-altered, edited, or republished as your own. All intellectual property rights and copyrights belong to the author. Gerald C. Notes: seizures and memory loss. A seizure is a sudden burst of abnormal electrical activity in the brain. Memory depends on calm, steady, and organized electrical signals. When a seizure happens, these signals become chaotic for a short time. This is why memory can be affected. The role of the hippocampus, deep inside each side of the brain, is a long, curved structure called the hippocampus. It is the main center for forming new memories. When a seizure spreads into or near the hippocampus, the normal memory process is disturbed. Why memory problems occur: 1. Electrical overload. During a seizure, the brain fires too fast and too wildly. The hippocampus cannot store new information during this overload, so events right before and right after the seizure may not be recorded. 2. Recovery shutdown. After a seizure, the brain enters a short recovery phase. The hippocampus becomes tired, like a battery that was drained suddenly. While it is recovering, memory may feel foggy or missing. 3. Confused blood flow. A seizure changes blood flow, oxygen, and chemicals in the brain. These changes temporarily interfere with the hippocampus, which makes memory weaker until balance returns. 4. Stress on the memory system. Even a short seizure can stress the circuits that handle memory. The effect is usually temporary, but if the seizure is strong or happens repeatedly, the stress can last longer. Simple summary: a seizure is like a lightning storm in the brain. The hippocampus, which forms new memories, cannot work normally during the storm. As a result, the brain may not record what happened right before or after the seizure. Once the storm ends and the brain calms down, memory usually improves again. My reflection: my motivation is pure and strong. When a person is trying to save his own life, the energy and discipline come naturally. Most doctors and professors do not feel this kind of life or death pressure every single day. They study diseases from the outside. I study them from the inside, as the patient, the scientist, and the survivor all in one body. That is why I can work from 13 to 14 hours every day during the past 16 years, and write 1,446 single-authored papers in most recent 9 years. It is not because I want fame, recognition, or acceptance. It is because my life depends on understanding the truth of my diseases, health, and life. Sharing my findings with others is simply my passion and my sense of purpose, but the original fuel comes from my strong desire of survival.